Well, good evening and welcome, or good morning, depending on where in the world you are. My name is Liz Baré, and I am welcoming you to this webinar on HR in HE, responding to the COVID-19 crisis. It's the latest in a series of online events organised by the Association of Commonwealth Universities to help member universities in this changing world. We have a wide audience from right across the Commonwealth. But before we start, I'd like to begin by paying my respects to the past and present elders of the Kulin Nation and acknowledge their custodianship on the land on which I am working today. This is a way in Australia that we acknowledge the first peoples of this land. The ACU is proud of how its member universities have responded to the coronavirus pandemic, springing into action to help find solutions to the problems and also to protect staff and students. In these extraordinary times, international collaboration matters more than ever. There is much to learn from each other and from the innovation and ingenuity that has been demonstrated during this period. That's why ACU is delighted to be hosting this series of online events to enable members to stay connected. This year too, our HR and HE Community Conference will be delivered virtually in September. So please keep checking the ACU website for details on this and other upcoming events. This webinar is delivered to you by members of the ACU HR in HE community, a forum for all staff at ACU member universities working in HR at all levels, from the most experienced professionals to those looking to increase or expand their institution's HR capacity. We welcome you to join the community. Just email hrinhe@acu.ac.uk. After our presenters' sessions, we are going to have a Q&A session. So please submit your questions by clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen and typing in your questions. Include your name, your university, and your country. The questions will be monitored by the ACU, and as we have a limited amount of time, a number of them will be selected to be answered by myself or other speakers. We're recording this seminar, so if you don't want your name or university to be included in the Q&A session, mention this when you submit your question. COVID-19 has disrupted life globally, and the higher education sector is no exception. HR has been the forefront of supporting universities' response to this crisis. I'm now going to speak very, very briefly about what's been happening in Australia. So, what's been happening? Well, one thing that's happened in Australia and New Zealand and the Pacific has been there's a lot of success in flattening the curve, but we're still very vulnerable to potential outbreaks and second wave infections. So there has been a lot of work, both from universities and our medical institutes, and a great contribution to local management of the pandemic. There's been some government support to businesses to minimise job loss. And like many, many other countries, we've had lockdown restrictions and restrictions on interaction for others. We're working from home, we're learning from home. Our borders are closed, and there's mandated quarantining for anybody who comes in. We're now seeing the gradual easing of restrictions, with some workplaces open, schools are returning, there's massive testing and contact tracing, but borders remain closed. This is a real problem for Australian and New Zealand universities, because many international students who would have come here to study at our universities can't get here or have decided not to come. So there is about a 20 to 30% cut in university revenue for this year. Our academic years are calendar years. There is questions, will the students ever come back? There are a whole lot of foreign policy issues around relations with China that are swirling around at the moment. And there is no additional government funding for long or short-term job loss in universities. So that's an issue. So a lot of the current focus in Australia in universities has been, how are we going to manage the financial crisis? Unions and representatives of universities attempted to negotiate a deal to save jobs. And they're pretty standard things like pay reductions, time fraction reductions, freezing appointments, redundancies at the last resort, and cessation of other expenditure other than on staffing. One of the things in this deal was that there was a joint union management committee to oversee the implementation of the deal. So that deal was sort of announced around the 13th of May. By the 26th of May, the deal is off the table. Many universities have rejected the deal in principle, and they're now seeking to negotiate alternate arrangements. So they're exploring all sorts of options. One university is talking more or less from borrowing from staff. It's saying, you give us some of your annual leave credits now, and in 5 years' time, we'll give them back to you. It's sort of a loan. Others are talking about redundancies, and others are trying to take a strategic position. How do we realign our structure with where we want to go in the future with the financial reality? So there's a lot of turmoil at the moment. At my university, we're very important in the research into COVID-19. We're very proud of the work that we're doing. And of course, after the 16th of March, when strong restrictions came in, staff worked from home, all learning was online, there's a lot of support for staff to work in new modes. In HR, the picture was really a welfare type picture, expanding the existing welfare services, COVID testing, paid quarantine leave, family leave entitlements. So that is the HR role. One of the HR roles is to look after staff, just as the university is looking after students. And the second is, how do they manage the future? How do we manage the future? And so the university is putting a proposal, which it did today, or actually yesterday, to the union and to negotiate with the unions that cover our university, that the university will cease capital work, cut executive pay. They're seeking a reversal of a salary increase that has just occurred, and they're trying to give some guarantees about redundancy. They're looking to reduce holiday leave balances and having some joint union university oversight. And the staff are going to vote on that on the 9th of June. So I'm sure that, like in many other countries, what is happening here is a fast-moving event, and that there are many mistakes being made and many innovative ideas coming forward. So that's a very brief overview on Australia. My next job is to introduce our next speaker, who's Navroz Surani, who will talk about his university and the issues in his country. So Navroz, I'm handing over to you.
So the Aga Khan, a little bit about the context here of the Aga Khan University. Aga Khan University is the first, is an international university which was chartered in 1983. We are basically a developing country university. It's a self-governing, autonomous private university. It's an international university now operating in 6 countries of Pakistan, East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda. We run a hospital in Afghanistan, Kabul, and we have an Institute for Study of Muslim Civilization in London, UK. We are an integral part of the Aga Khan Development Network, and we provide higher education in several disciplines. We carry out research, and we, in addition, operate 7 hospitals and 325 outreach clinics. So we are into education, and we are also into healthcare. So we have both the activities going simultaneously, and we are of an international standard. Here are some key facts about the university. As I mentioned, we are a developing country university. We've got 2,800 plus students, so we are not a very large university, but we are relatively a young university. 16,000 alumni, 15,000 plus faculty and staff, and we, as I mentioned, we operate in, we have 6 campuses and teaching sites around the world. COVID-19 has been a dominant issue for all of us in most of our lives. We are experiencing unprecedented lifestyle changes. Employees at the university and all around the world are going through fears, stresses. There are a lot of uncertainties and unknowns. The Aga Khan University faculty and staff and the Human Resources Division has created many avenues and many communication channels so that we can provide the necessary comfort, we can provide the necessary impetus for the employees to continue to work with the same zeal and enthusiasm. So what has been the response of the Aga Khan University to COVID-19? We have been at the forefront of providing safe, high-quality care for infected patients. As I mentioned, we also run hospitals, and we received COVID patients. In fact, on February the 26th, we received the first COVID patient case in Pakistan at our university hospital, and we treated that patient. We are conducting research to better understand the virus and its spread and to develop the innovative solutions. So our research team is conducting clinical trials on various opportunities and avenues where we can better understand this virus. Our faculty and staff and the senior leadership are advising the governments and other hospitals in the healthcare professions. So what is happening is that our experience is not only being confined to our university, we are sharing our experiences and our learnings with the government, with the federal government, with the provincial governments, and our senior faculty, our leadership are engaged with the government in drafting various protocols, in helping the public understand this virus, how to go about it. So a lot of work is being done, and our staff is greatly involved in this. We are educating the public. We have created different communication channels. We have created different avenues like videos to tell the general public about this pandemic, how to protect from this, what are the consequences of what are different avenues where they can go to if they are, God forbid, they are hit by this pandemic. So we are educating the public through various social media channels. We have created videos. In one of our videos has been watched by 1.3 million people in the country and around the region. We are also, as a university, we have, overnight we had to bring about the change of teaching the students or communicating with the students online. So teaching online has taken place, and our students are continuing to learn while remaining safe and through online teaching. The good thing was that we were already prepared for it. Our network for quality of teaching was already preparing our faculty for the online teaching, and we already had a setup. We got about 200 online courses for our faculty to choose from to teach the students. So in a way, this really helped us, and now our entire teaching has gone online, and students and faculty are interacting via Zoom and other platforms. We're also mobilizing the AKU community. This is a crisis situation. So it's important that it's not just the AKU staff and faculty, but our alumni all across the world have come forward, and they are assisting us in different ways. Our volunteers, our students are helping us mend various desks, various emergency response measures. So it's all the community thing which is helping us in fighting this COVID and in managing this situation. So now this was a little bit of a background about what a context about the university, what the university as such is doing. But of course, we have to know what HR interventions have been now. And talking about HR interventions in such a short time is not doing justice to what all we have been doing. But here are some of the key things that we have been managing. First of all, as HR professionals, we have been put into a sort of a paradoxical situations, and we are managing that various paradoxes. Of course, the main paradox has been that on the one hand, we have to ensure that we give security to our employees, we reduce their stresses, we reduce their uncertainties, we give them the right messages. But on the other hand, we also have to think about our own financial situations. We also have to think of our budgets. We have to see about our own revenues. So here comes the role of HR, and we as HR professionals have always been talking and always been saying about supporting and advising as a credible activist, to the senior leadership. This was a time, and this is a time where we have been very, very active, and especially our HR leadership has been very active in providing the right balance in managing various paradoxes. So, for example, the time came when we didn't panic because we had to understand that our financial situations was of course the revenues were going down, and we had to see what's going to happen in the future. A lot of uncertainties. So we tried to create a situation where we said, okay, at this point in time, we are not going to have any layoff for our people. We are going to protect their jobs. But at the same time, as Liz mentioned in her university, when the management took a salary cut, we took the decision. So that was a type of a decision which was well received by us. So 70% of our workforce was not touched. We didn't do anything as far as their salary and frontline employee salaries were concerned. Only 30% of the staff and faculty took the cut at this point in time. So that was a good message that we conveyed, that we really care for the employees. We really care for creating and making decisions based on the ground realities. Then we started our HR team, especially our learning and development colleagues in Pakistan, started, and also in other campuses, started facilitating the new work trends. And we just obviously started to work overnight from home. So people had to be trained, people had to be provided the IT support. So all these things were taken into consideration, and lot of help and assistance was provided to them. We started supporting employees and showing flexibility. Of course, rules are made, policies are there, but this was a time when HR had to come and exercise that flexibility. So a lot of flexibility towards working from home, taking leave of absences were shown, and a lot of employee needs were actually addressed at this point in time, and in a manner with some passion, with some empathy and compassion. We created a number of avenues and interventions to keep employees engaged and motivated during this time, and we continue to do that. We have the most important thing that I consider is important at this point in time is the communication. It's a communication and communicating the right messages to our faculty and staff. And the messages that we drafted, we created, had to be sincere. The messages had to be open, had to be caring, genuine, and messages of hope, because employees are going through a lot of uncertainties. Employees are going through a lot of situations at home, at work. They're concerned about their families. They're concerned about their health. They're concerned about their future. They are concerned about their jobs, for example. And this is something which we all don't know. It's a lot of uncertainties. So this is a time where we have to give the right messages to our employees, and right from our president all the way down to our middle management, our leadership, our executives. We all communicated these messages through various social media channels, through town hall meetings, through circulars, and we have created our CEOs of entities, created different social media channels, through videos, through flyers. We have been communicating, and this communication is genuine, and we are being very open about it. We have also shared with them our financial situation, so that nobody is in a situation which is not aware of. So we wanted to make everything open, but we went and made a genuine communication to our staff. Here are a few of the flyers, a few of the communication tools that we use. For example, we created in HR an employee hotline. So this is COVID-19 employee hotline. This is 24/7. So anyone has any issues, any problem, there is somebody to answer. Then there is an emergency desk was created by our HR function to facilitate our employees. We created, now look at this, we created a sort of a suggestion system. So it says, make a difference. Share your ideas for reducing costs and increasing the income. Now, you know, we have been discussing about this employee suggestion system for so many months, but suddenly the time came that we had to do it, and we really created this particular system in place, and it's on our portal. Anybody can give any information, suggestions, ideas, which will be reviewed by the senior leadership. So here is an opportunity that we have created for our faculty and staff to really make a difference by making a suggestion system in place. We created various programs for our employees. Like there is one example of our psychiatrist, Dr. Nargis Asad, sharing tips to manage mental health during Corona crisis for our faculty and staff. This has been a huge issue. Under stress, we all need, many people would need mental health support and guidance. So this is just one example of the many that we have created. My last slide is about the future implications, and this is my own personal observations that obviously we are going through an era of disruption and uncertainty that we have to live for some time. There's going to be, as we see the future there's going to be an online learning. This is going to grow more. engagement with the diaspora will increase because this is a pandemic which every country is facing. So moving forward, post-COVID, when situation comes back to normal, we may see that our diaspora, like for example, there are a lot of Pakistani diaspora in the developed countries who are knowledgeable, who have the knowledge. Now the world is open. People have started to use online learning. So diaspora can become very important. There will be maybe a newer form of employment contract. It may emerge, like full-time employment has been in place, but we may have more part-time contract. Maybe we are working for 3 employers at a time. Maybe we have temporary employment. Maybe people are working 3 times in a week. We don't know. But obviously we'll have to be doing more with less. And finally, we being in HR in higher education sector have a unique opportunity. This is the opportunity for us, in my opinion. It's an opportunity to do some research and create new knowledge and ideas for post-COVID HR management. And we can, because we are in the university, we are sitting at a place where knowledge is created. HR folks can really do some more research, and each university have their own stories to tell and own experiences to share. So sure, we have a lot of opportunities to really share, and maybe at some point in time, we can have a sort of a seminar or a conference on this particular aspect, which is so very important. Thank you. Over to Liz.
Thank you, Navroz. A really interesting and wide-ranging presentation. Our next speaker is Kgomotso Kasonkola, who's the Senior Director HR at the University of Witwatersrand, Johannesburg in South Africa. Kgomotso, over to you.
Thanks, Liz, and greetings to colleagues. I'll share my slide. So I'll be talking to you about experiences in the South African context. And just to start off, we began on a note that indicated some 16 people were infected with the virus out of 59 million South Africans. And on the 15th of March, there was the first national state of disaster being declared when schools were closed and universities went on early recess. 8 days later, we saw an increase from 16 infected to 61 infected individuals, in fact, 402 individuals. And all we could do with was essential services who were permitted to keep the institutions running. On the 9th of April, the toll rose to 1,934, and the first death case was reported. That's when we began with continued with the lockdown alert level 5, which extended the initial period from the 26th of March until the end of April. Then on the 13th of May, a rise again in the cases to 12,000, but we also noted 4,745 recoveries, and sadly lost about 219 lives. The measures were then changed from lockdown alert level 5 to level 4, which meant some easing up of some movement and some activity in the economy. And we began seeing the first return of students to campuses. And in this case, it was the final year medical students, as well as the trainee medical doctors, who then would assist the country with the COVID-19 addressing. Then on the 24th of May, as said 2 days ago, we saw a rise again to 22,000. You would see that the figures double up each time. However, we are glad that there have been 12,000 recoveries and 429 deaths, sadly. The figure has since grown to 25,000 and over 500 deaths at this point in time. We move into lockdown alert level 3, and the schools will be reopening on the 1st of June. So those are the levels and the objectives each one is serving. Alert level 5 was the most stringent of measures. We now on level 3, which has eased some restrictions in terms of movement, in terms of working, and in terms of focus on the high-risk areas. Then, as far as the university is concerned, we are a residential contract university with about 6,486 beds and over 36,000 students. I noted that in the colleagues' presentation, there was about 100 and something students. We're still a small institution compared to those figures. We employing about 6,000 staff members, of whom 4,500 are support staff, and the rest would be academics, 1,500. I'm currently the senior director chairing the forum of HR directors in the higher education sector. So I have some institutional and sector-wide responsibilities in this regard. Based on directives, because these are guiding our actions each time, and regulations from government, we had to identify categories of employees who could be deployed to perform essential services at universities. And I must say there was a bit of concern in terms of essential services as we define them for institutions, because they were not actually defined in the regulations that government promulgated under the National Disaster Act. So it was a makeshift kind of arrangement for institutions. So naturally, pushbacks were experienced from the unions. The second thing we had to do was to work a protocol on how we're going to manage the leave of absence from campuses, as well as how we deal with instances where colleagues get infected while on duty, and therefore giving way to quarantine arrangements that would be necessary for healing. Lots of consultation with organized labor on the proposed staffing arrangements, because everybody was sitting at home in alert level 5 because there was restriction of movement, and only those performing essential services had the right to move around the country, provided they had permits, special permits enabling that movement to take place. And then we currently consulting on a remote working policy to enable colleagues who can work from home to do so. And we also, in that policy, talking about flexible arrangements of work. We're currently in the phase where a staggered return of colleagues, students back to campus as permitted by government is taking place. We also have a University Wellness Forum that coordinates all issues of health and wellness, which has particular interest in the issue of mental health, as was intimated to the sector through the loss of colleagues to suicide. So we run that forum, and it sort of oversees all issues of mental and other health-related issues. We also do have a service provider contract with a company that provides mental health support to families and employees, online counseling, face-to-face counseling. They also do manager empowerment programs, as well as giving us a report on the utilization rate on services. And they do also give us brochures, which we from time to time share with colleagues on campus. So all our HR staff, and about a third of university staff does have laptops and internet connectivity, so they're able to work from home. We also keep up on weekly meetings to address the fears and uncertainties that colleagues may be having. As far as challenges are concerned, as I indicated, the first challenge was to define what we meant by essential services. Naturally, because universities do have protection service, campus security. In our case, there's a clinical kind of environment because we do have a medical school. And those areas, including in the science faculties, where we do care for animals that are used in the research environment, are declared as essential services. And then the next challenge that we faced was that there was a lack of sector approach to managing HR implications. So one university dispensation was used by unions against the other to negotiate for a better deal. So we have since then put a guideline together to guide institutions in how to navigate the HR implications of COVID-19. Of course, there was resistance in terms of organized labor resisting their members to perform essential services, naturally because essential services in universities were not classified in any of the regulations that were promulgated. The other challenge that we had to deal with was the upkeep of the health and safety measures vis-a-vis the old habits of staff. For instance, you would have cleaners who were supposed to be wearing gloves and masks not doing that regularly because they felt that the masks were actually constraining than enabling. And communication, as my colleague highlighted, is more important than ever before. However, we do have a diversity of languages that is presenting a challenge, and we will tell you how we dealt with that in a minute. Furthermore, we having challenges in terms of differential understanding and mixing up of concepts like screening and testing. For instance, our elementary workers would insist on temperatures being checked as part of the screening. And the university has actually adopted a self-administered type questionnaire that employees are completing each time they come onto the workplace. But for those employees who are in elementary jobs, they see that as lack of screening. So we're busy dealing with that perception issue at the moment. As I indicated, the sector guidelines are in place and have been shared with all 26 universities for to shape their initiatives back home. Extensive consultation with organized labor has happened. We call unions organized labor here. The staff training and translating communique into indigenous languages have been achieved just to ensure that individuals are able to receive critical messages in their own mother tongue. And of course, the university does have a technical committee, which includes the participation by unions. As for HR practice and practitioners, we do rely heavily on the forum for sharing of information, practices, and policies. We do have other communities of practice in place, like the one on staff health and wellness, which meets regularly and advise institutions on how to deal with matters of health and wellness. Topical in that area is the issue of mental health. And we have noted that the working from home or remotely has added more concerns to the area of mental health than ever before because of the blurring of roles between home and work. We also have a transformation forum and an employee relations forum which guides other processes. There's also, than ever before, a close collaboration between finance directors for sustainability issues and HR directors. As far as handling the crisis going forward, we're going to contend with open universities or the concept itself because there's more and more reliance on online teaching at the moment, which may be a new normal for universities in South Africa. So that then has implications for the staffing arrangements as well as for sustainability of institutions, because we had to find money to enable the process for online teaching, which then needs to be replaced, or we'll have challenges of replacing such money. So financial sustainability is one of the issues to contend with going forward. We also noting that line managers find it a challenge to manage remotely, so they need to be more empowered. We envisaging, like the Australian situation, fallout strategies being implemented for those individuals who are neither able to work from home, nor can they go to the workplaces because of the lockdown conditions. And in the end, we need to be balancing the mental health with operational and business continuity. Because this is an unprecedented era we find ourselves in, we're envisaging a change in the way HR is conceived and implemented. And while we can train others, some may not be able to be trained, and therefore we need to start talking social plans and ease them into the communities if they fall out of institutions. And HR practitioners need to stick more together than ever before. And in our case, the communities of practice are beginning to do exactly that. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kgomotso. That's a fascinating session. And I think you're right. What comes out of this pandemic is going to be very different to what we had before. Now, I'd like to introduce our final speaker, Ian Wright, who's the Interim Director of Human Resources at the University of Sheffield in the United Kingdom. Ian.
Thank you, Liz, and thanks to everyone else who's joined today and the other speakers. So I'm going to run through, hopefully in a fairly quick time, a bit of a run through of what's happened to us in the UK. Some of the key people issues that we've had to deal with in Sheffield, and a little bit about what we have done, certainly within my team and our department, as a bit of a case study around how we kind of been looking after ourselves through this process. But to start us off, just in case you aren't aware, and I can't believe there's many around the world that aren't aware of the University of Sheffield, surely, but we are one of the top 100 universities in the world. We're ranked 13th in the UK. And as you can see, quite a large organisation, but the key thing for the relevance of this presentation is a big international and particularly Chinese student population. And we're one of the Russell Group of universities of which are the kind of research intensive organisations in the UK. So in terms of us, that's the context. In terms of the UK, this is a very rough and ready timeline of what's happened in all things COVID related, both nationally and specifically to us here on the campus in Sheffield. And I think the key thing to point out here is clearly there's been quite a slow start. And certainly if you listen to any of the press in the UK, there's arguably been quite a slow response as well to that slow start. But we had very little going on for quite some time in the UK as cases started to emerge. And then around mid-March, pretty much everything went up in the air and things changed very, very quickly. One of the key triggers from a UK perspective was the Premier League being suspended, not least because there's large swathes clearly of the population are wondering what they're going to do on a Saturday afternoon if there's no football to watch. But more broadly speaking, it's a signal that these were still large gatherings of thousands and thousands of people happening mid-March as cases were starting to escalate in the UK. And we were starting to get quite a lot of pressure on campus from our staff and our unions, and to a lesser extent our student body, to say, why are we not taking more drastic measures and closing the campus? And we were very keen to be seen to following whatever the government advice was. But as soon as that happened, or very shortly after that happened, we had effectively a ban on international travel. So the FCA is the Foreign Commonwealth Office. It's the government group government department that advises on such things. And then we really started to see things hitting home on campus. We had our first case on campus identified shortly after that. Our reaction then, when you look back on it now, seems a little bit OTT, but we kind of shut a whole building down. We instigated a huge deep clean. We triggered all of our incident management processes, which are pretty well tested, but I'll cover those a little bit later on. And then almost immediately, it kind of escalated further and further, and we just got lots and lots of calls to close our campus. And it was increasingly obvious that it was going to be very difficult to get people in onto campus working when there was such concern in our population. So we took the decision to close the campus, effectively close the buildings, continue our teaching, but close the buildings, and shift our teaching online, which we did over the course of a weekend, which is a Herculean effort by our academic colleagues in particular to do that. And then very shortly after we'd done that transition, the whole of the economy in the UK started slowing down. So schools closed, and then we entered into our period of lockdown, which many of you around the world will experience in different guises. What that meant at that point, though, was from our point of view, lots and lots of our staff had lots of issues around schooling their children at home, or at least childcare. We had lots of people who were very concerned about their own health if they were had underlying health conditions themselves. And we had lots of worries from our student body, obviously, about health and well-being, but also about their education. So we brought forward our Easter break. We closed the university down for earlier, and we closed it for an extra week to allow us a bit of time, a bit of breathing space to really do the proper shift online and get our teaching into where it needed to be. We're now off the end of this chart and actually coming out to the other end and starting to see some loosening of the lockdown restrictions. And again, I'll come on to that shortly, but I think that's where really the hard work is going to start in terms of getting the campus back up and running again. So in terms of the key people issues that we've been grappling with, they fall into three categories. Really, it's the top line talks about people's working arrangements. The middle one is what I've touched on already, is that huge shift from face-to-face large-scale lectures and teaching to online version of it. And the third one covers off the issues we've had around research. So in the interest of time, I'll focus on the top and bottom ones. But as I said, we've got basically 8,000 staff all shifted and working from home, pretty much all. And a lot of those grappling with childcare, with schooling. And we could sense that this was going to be a big pressure point for lots of people. It certainly was for me. I've got 3 kids at home, all of school age, and it makes life quite challenging for me. So I guess if that was the case here, we ought to do something a bit more reassuring for people. So we put an early message out saying to people, look, we know it's difficult. Do what you can. We understand that productivity may reduce, but please don't worry about it. We will commit to making sure that everyone who's working with us continues to be paid in full whilst we're in this period of lockdown and we're experiencing all of the challenges we have. We tried to put out an assurance message. We also then had to grapple with this government support that was put in place, which is fantastic for many employers. The government basically said it would fund up to 80% of staff salaries if they were unable to do their jobs in their normal place of work or at home. And companies could apply to get this funding, which was great, but it was very, very ambiguous for the higher education sector. There's a lot of questions about whether we could or couldn't, should or shouldn't apply for this. And then trying to identify those people who are working from home, who having had all of those messages around productivity, we then write to and say, actually, do you know what, we don't think you can do your job properly at home. We'd like to put you in this position of what's called furlough. And this is what it means for you. So again, another shift in our communications. That's certainly a key part of trying to reassure people that actually by doing this, they were helping the university, helping our financial situation. And then the third group of people we have had is those that are still doing what we deem to be essential services. So this is one of our security team, and we have a full security presence on campus whilst the buildings are closed. We've also got a range of different people who are maintaining different long-term experiments that need to be maintained. We've got people looking after some of our animals in the facilities that we have there. And we've got other key services making sure that our buildings and our estates can stay safe whilst we're not there. So we've had to manage their expectations and their workload and their fears and concerns about being on campus while everyone else is kind of in this lockdown situation. So our messaging to each of those groups has been slightly different, but each time we've tried to take a position of reassurance. The online or shift to online teaching, rather, I've covered already, so I won't labour that point. The third group, though, to perhaps pick up on is our researchers. And as I said, we're a research intensive university. It's absolutely at the core of what we do as an organisation. And we've had to shut the vast majority of our research labs because the government advice is if you can work at home, you should work at home. So we've taken that to, I guess, the extreme at the moment. And we closed a lot of the labs. Most of the research that we've been undertaking, we've either shifted at home or it's had to pause. And that's caused, understandably, some concern within our research community. Not least because they're seeing those in the middle box, you can see they're still coming into campus because we do have a number of, particularly in our medical school, a number of researchers looking into the genome of the virus, looking into ways that we could try and support the efforts to get a vaccine going, as well as supporting our local Public Health England efforts on testing for COVID. So there's lots of people that are still on campus, and that's causing some dissatisfaction and concern for some of those who aren't able to. And then finally, we've got a group of people, and this is actually one of our engineers who's been converting their workshop and lab into a production facility. So what he's got on there is a 3D printed mask that we've been making on campus, and producing lots of protective equipment for the NHS and our medical staff around the country. So we're really trying to rise to the challenge of supporting the national effort on the COVID response, as well as all the local stuff that we have within the university. In terms of how we've tried to address that, I mentioned earlier we have an incident management response approach, which we've rehearsed a lot. We do a lot of business continuity planning within the university for just this kind of circumstance. And that triggered in very quickly, very easily, and we have a series of subgroups running which look at each of these areas. So the people issue around working from home versus the furlough versus the being on campus, issues around learning and teaching and the communication to our students about their education, about their qualifications, the process with our research community, looking at student recruitment, and effectively all of that works through to provide our overall response. And we've made sure that we've kept all of our key people informed. So we have weekly Zoom type meetings for all of our senior leaders and heads of department, so a group of about 100 or so people, so that we can brief them absolutely on everything that's happening sector wide, as well as what's going on locally. We communicate regularly with all of our staff on very different messages sometimes, but keeping the same themes of reassurance, but in a spirit of openness and transparency. And we've made sure that we keep our trade unions informed. So I'm spending an awful lot of time talking to trade unions, at least weekly, often more frequently than that, just making sure that they understand what's going on. And so far, I have to say they've been pretty supportive of the work that we've been doing. So in terms of looking after ourselves, our focus very much here is on the well-being of staff. And I know there's some questions come in about the stresses for people in all of this change. So when my team moved off site, I was very concerned that we lost the sense, that we could lose the sense of that team perspective. So some very enterprising people in my department came up with this idea of this wellbeing hub, which we've now rolled out to different departments across the university. But this is it's a central place that allows us to connect either individually as groups, place to look after, or for resources to look after our wellbeing, as well as some stuff around productivity and our personal development. So it covers anything from your desk setup at home and you're making sure you're working safely, to signposting people to resources for drugs and alcohol abuse or domestic violence or whatever else might be affecting their lives. We've got online learning and development resources, but by far the most popular part of it has been the kind of social element of connections. So we've got a pets corner. So this is my colleague Peter's dog. We've asked people to send in pictures of what they've been doing to keep occupied during the lockdown. So images you can see there, that's actually me in my back garden swimming against a tether to try and keep myself fit. And we've done a few nights out, in inverted commas, at various pubs that we've created, the stay in, the lock in, and as we emerge from lockdown, the halfway house. And it's been really, really good to just keep that engagement and keep that social element going within the department. We're also encouraging our managers to make sure that they touch base with their teams on a regular basis, trying to just keep people informed of what's going on, but also using it as an opportunity to check in because those visual cues that you might get that something's not quite right when you see someone in the office or in the campus day in, day out, much harder to get remotely. So it's a real focus of the work that the team's doing, and so far it seems to have been fairly successful. Obviously, the longer we go on in this situation, the more challenging it's going to be. So I'll conclude with just my thoughts on what I see as the kind of future people issues. Clearly, in the short term, we've got an issue about returning to campus. How we deliver teaching as we do that, we're likely to see the end of major large-scale lectures and much more blended learning. And the points we've just talked about in terms of the remote management of staff will come up as challenges. In the medium term, as our student recruitment goes into our next academic year, the financial implications of the university will become much more apparent. That's going to have knock-on issues for us in terms of size and shape of the university, and I know other colleagues have talked about things that they're doing to try and address the cost issues. And then longer term, I think we need to think much more differently about how we work, what flexibility we ask for from our employer and what we're able to provide, what that means for our space requirements as a campus, but also how do we respond to those changing expectations of our student body. So I'm conscious of time completely, so I will stop there. The slides will come out, but there's some links on there if anyone has any queries about the stuff that's gone up, but I shall hand back to Liz.
Thank you, Ian. Well, we've vastly overrun our time, but that's because we had so many interesting things to follow up. And we have an enormous number of questions, and somehow we're going to make a judgment. So I think there's a lot of questions about technology. So I think I might ask our panel to sort of pull them all together and ask our panelists two things. We've heard a lot about how our academic staff had to revolutionize the way they taught and put all their material online and do that overnight. I'd like to perhaps ask Ian, we've now also got a new way of working for our non-academic staff. We're more flexible, we work from home, we have fun online. What do you think the impact on HR in the longer term is going to be as we can have more flexible work? We don't need to be there. Do you think it's going to be that personal touch that we've always loved? Do you think that's going to remain, or do you think it'll change?
Thanks, Liz. Well, I think, as I said, this is clearly one of the big long-term challenges that we're going to have to face. And my take on it is that the people management side of what we all do, either as HR professionals or from our broader community, is going to absolutely have to ramp up to new levels that we've probably not seen in the sector, certainly not in the UK in many years. So for me, the HR challenge there is twofold. One, it's enabling and responding to those demands for greater flexibility, and then factoring in, as I said, what that means for our space requirements on campus. But equally, we need to support and engage our management cohort so that they can do the right thing by their staff, so that they can manage people off campus and they can help their teams to thrive in an environment where they don't necessarily have that day-to-day interaction, but they have much more flexibility about how and when they deliver their jobs.
Thank you. And now we've got a really practical question, and perhaps Kgomotso, you might like to comment on this. Doria Abdullah from the University of Technology in Malaysia is asking whether or not performance appraisals should be coming to a halt, given the big disruption that we've undergone through with our work.
In our case, we took a view that we're not halting performance management processes because of COVID-19. If anything, it created an opportunity for staff to log their deliverables in agreement with the management and show proof of delivery thereon. So it has worked so far so good for us. So we haven't halted any processes. In fact, we are encouraging the process to go ahead.
Good, thank you. And Navroz, is this the same for you?
Yes, I think we have to be, ready and prepared for the change. And maybe there will be some changes in the way we are appraising people. The system and the processes might change, but obviously we cannot do away with this entire performance appraisal system, which is so very important. So we are not abandoning the processes and the systems, but we may have to adapt to the situation.
Yes, and one last question here, and this again is for you, Navroz, and it's talking about most of our speakers have dealt with this issue of stress, but is there anything we can do other than sort of teaching people more resilience, or is there anything in that area that you think we should be doing? We've got a question here about how can we change the behaviour of individuals without causing them stress, from Dr. Mridula Mishra from India.
Well, behavior change requires a lot of time, obviously. But I think what we need, it all depends upon how we are communicating and what we communicate. Now, the thing is that we are all in it together. This virus has hit everyone across the globe, every organization. And just like what we say in HR, non-discriminatory policies, and we are open, we are non-discriminatory. The virus has been non-discriminatory, I think. It has gone to the west, gone to the east. So I think such messages can really help us improve employees' understanding of the situation and improve them to manage the uncertainties. So it will all depend upon how the organization and its leadership actually communicate and take the decisions which are in a sort of a, or manage those paradoxes well, so that employees have that confidence. And but again, the stresses will remain, and that's why the issues about mental health and various seminars and communications will certainly help in improving the behavior and managing stress. But of course, this is uncertain time.
Well, thank you so much, Navroz. It's true, and it's a wonderful thing that we're all in this together, which is great, a mantra here in Australia. But first of all, may I thank, we now have to draw our webinar to the end. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us and for your participation. There are a lot of Q&As that we haven't answered, and we might have a bit of a chat afterwards, and where there are individual specific questions, we will try and get the answers directly back to the questioners. I'd like to thank our speakers, Navroz, Ian and Kgomotso, and because for the work they've done, but also their great insights into how they're approaching this pandemic. We'll be sharing a link to the video as soon as we can, to the presentation as soon as we can, and there will be an evaluations survey, so please complete it and let us know your thoughts. This is the latest event in the ACU's series of online events focusing on how universities can adapt to change. The next one will be supporting research community on university libraries beyond the campus walls, which will be on Wednesday the 3rd of June at 2 p.m. in British Standard Time. And just to remind you, we will have our HR in HE Community Conference this September, and full details are available on the website. If you register, you can also access the full recording on demand anytime after the event. Please join me in thanking our speakers. Take care, stay safe, and be brave. Thank you very much.